Morning, everyone. Made it to Wednesday, halfway through another week. Good for you. Congratulate yourselves if you want to pat yourself on the back. First thing I need to do is return some leftover material. Just take me a minute to do that. Oh, you're welcome. So for today, you had for me work on an assignment on page 31 and 32 of the workbook. I just want to clarify one thing, because I noticed some students that were not here, but during quarantine, they were confused. On page 32, when I asked you to do section C, number 2, I wanted you to do all 7 of these Roman numerals for the passage of number 2. I had a student submit something on page 32, and well, a few students, they thought all they had to do was fill in blank number 2. So I just want to be clear that it was blanks 1 through 7. Fill in all those blanks with the correct Roman numeral for number 2 in the sentence. And I'll get to the homework momentarily. Let's just quickly take a minute or two to cover some information that we talked about last class. Last class, we discovered what all of the triad types are when we build them on each scale of a major scale and a minor scale. And we use only the notes of the scale to build and generate those chords. And we found out that in major keys, the triad that we get on scale degree 1 is major. So we use a capital Roman numeral 1. The triad on scale degree 2 is minor. On scale degree 3 turns out to be minor. Scale degree 4 is major. Scale degree 5 is major. Scale degree 6 is minor. And scale degree 7 is the only diminished triad we get. In minor keys, we found out that just using the notes primarily of the harmonic minor scale gives us these types of triads on each scale degree. The first triad on scale degree 1 is minor. The one on scale degree 2 is diminished. The one on scale degree 3 is major. Scale degree 4 is minor. Scale degree 5 is major. Scale degree 6 is major. And the triad on scale degree 7 in minor keys is also diminished, just like it is in major. What was the term I used to describe these? It starts with a D. Yeah, diatonic, that's right. That means we're just only using the notes of the key or the scale itself to get these chords. So they are called diatonic triads. And then finally, we learned last class three important pieces of information that a Roman numeral will tell us. The number of the Roman numeral itself, such as a 5, will tell us that the chord we're looking at is built on scale degree 5 in that key. Another way to say it is that the Roman numeral 5 tells us that the root of the triad we're looking at is scale degree 5 of that key or scale. The root is scale degree 5. The case of the triad, or the Roman numeral I should say, also tells us whether the triad is major, minor, augmented, or diminished. Diminished triads, of course, require an extra symbol, namely a small circle or a degree symbol. And then finally, we mentioned that the base position symbols, or inversion numbers, that we learned for triads a couple classes ago, are used in conjunction or in connection with Roman numerals as well to tell us the particular base position or inversion of the triad we're happening to be analyzing at that moment. Okay? So those are the three crucial items of information that Roman numerals tell us. And you needed to use that information in order to complete section A, part of section B on page 31, and then number 2 on section C. So before I collect this page out of your workbook, let me ask if there are any questions about any of those problems there. Section A, all of them I think you had to do. Section B, just 1 through 7, and then section C, we talked about number 2. Yes?
Okay, so I had 2 questions. On section A, I had a question on number 14. I want to make sure I did it right.
Okay. Let's take a look at number 14 right away then. We're in the treble clef. And we're told that the key for the scale we're supposed to analyze the triad in terms of is F sharp minor. And the triad we have has these pitches, G sharp, C sharp, and E sharp. And we're supposed to analyze or label that triad with a Roman numeral with all its proper case and with any possible inversion numbers if necessary. As I look at this triad, I can tell that it is not in group position because the notes are not stacked evenly in thirds. So I need to find out what is the root of this chord. Which of those 3 pitches?
C sharp.
Yeah, the C sharp is, because if I were to rearrange the notes, the only way I could get them to be stacked in thirds would be to have C sharp on the bottom, E sharp in the middle, and G sharp on the top. And we know when a triad is stacked in thirds, the root is the lowest tone. So in that arrangement, C sharp would be the lowest tone, hence C sharp is the root. And the root is all important because it tells us what Roman number to analyze it with in the blank. In the key of F sharp minor, what scale degree is C sharp? 5. Okay. And we know that in minor keys, well also in major keys, Roman numeral 5, we always write them uppercase. And I should make a point to say, you know, if you do this, that's not really clear to me that that's a capital 5. I know that in your in typeface, in your workbook, and on assignments, I know that you sometimes get something that looks a little like this, but you can tell, you know, when you're looking at typed material, whether something is large or lowercase. So just to be clear for my sake, I always like to have my students be clear about their 5s and put a line above and a line below to let me know that that's your capital 5. So if you can get in the habit right away, when you notate your Roman numeral 5s as capital 5s, to put lines above and below, then I won't confuse them for these little itty bitty things, which are actually pretty worthless chords. Yeah, we don't write minor 5s in this class. So I know that this is part of the answer, but I'm not quite done with the answer yet. And that's because I deduced that this triad is not in root position. So I need to give it an inversion number. What inversion is it in?
It's in second inversion.
Good, it's in second inversion because the 5th of the chord, the G sharp, is the lowest tone. And then the numbers for second inversion are, so that should be my final answer for number,
I was
14.
actually just wanting to make sure I get the chord right.
okay, you mean like the Roman numeral?
No, the making the chord.
Ah, okay,
I just want to make sure I get it right.
okay. Yes.
Is
So,
it allowed to be
no, it's actually a major triad. If it was an augmented triad, it would need a plus next to the 5. But remember that we don't get any augmented triads in
Yeah, I
major
didn't
or
think
minor.
so, that's what
Yeah, and I believe all of these were supposed to be diatonic chords. So yeah, it's a major triad, C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, which makes me use a capital 5, and it's the second inversion.
And when we had a number, did you guys want us to write, the little n, the line next to it, or just write the lowercase letters?
For a minor Roman numeral?
No, for the chord. Like, did you want us to write B flat N, or just like two lowercase?
Oh, I don't think we had, were you doing the lead sheet symbols? Yeah, in the,
Oh, did we not?
yeah, on the assignment sheet, I wrote no lead sheet symbols.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
so in other words, yeah, so in other words, all you need to do is show me the Roman numeral underneath the chord. You don't have to do any of those other symbols above, because we haven't learned those yet. And I won't make you do those until we actually get to those. And even then, I'll only have you do those for maybe a few classes, and then we'll drop them in. Yeah. So I think I understand what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, I don't know, I don't need to put an M in there. Yeah, did you have a question about something else?
Yeah, on section C, on, yeah, on number 2, like, second grade.
The second one?
We just had to do the I was just confused about the base position symbol. I got the Roman numerals, but like, I know what the base position symbol means, but I don't, like, it just confused my brain.
Okay, well, without writing it maybe on the staff, let me just write the note names for number 2, for the second line in number 2. For instance, we have a C in the bass, we have a C in what's called the tenor voice, we have an A in what's called the alto voice, and we have, it looks like an E flat, according to the key signature, in the soprano voice. Now, I don't remember if I mentioned this to you guys last class, but is it a crime that one of the triads notes is doubled or duplicated? No. It's no big deal. Just ignore. If one of them's doubled or duplicated, just ignore it. That's okay. So these are the 3 notes. These are the 3 notes of our triad, A, C, and E flat. Now, if I stack those in thirds, the A will need to be on the bottom. So, and what, by the way, this tells us we're in the key or the scale of B flat, right? What scale degree is the root A in B flat? 7. What type of Roman numeral 7th then do we write? Diminished. So in the blank, you got to have the 7 diminished. But is the triad in root position? What's the lowest sounding pitch of the A, C, and E flat on that beat? The C. So C is the third of the triad, and when the third of a triad is on the bottom, we know that that's in first inversion. So what should my ultimate final Roman numeral symbol be there for that line number 2? It should be 7 diminished and then what? 6. That's right. The 6 indicates first inversion. Okay. If A was in the bass or on the bottom, then I would just write 7 diminished. But because the third of the chord is on the bottom, that is the C, not the root, then I have to put a number there to indicate, in this case, first inversion.
Can you do 5 for the same part?
Sure.
For the base, for base positions?
So line number 5 in that one. If I write the notes out, I've got G in the bottom, I've got D in the tenor, and I've got B flat up above. Oops, B flat. Because of the key signature. Now, I know it's spaced a little funny, but is that triad? Let's write it over here in root position so we know what's what. In order to stack those three notes in thirds, I would need to have G on the bottom. G, B flat, D. Now I can see what note is what member of the chord. I can tell that G is the root, B flat is the third, and D is the fifth. So, is this, the root, first of all I should say the root of this chord is G. Now we're in the key of B flat. What scale degree is G in B flat? 6. And we're in B flat major. So what type of Roman numeral 6 do I write? I write lowercase, because 6s in major keys, 6 chords are lowercase. So I'm going to, in that blank, I'm going to write lowercase 6. Do I have to add any other inversion numbers or base position numbers? The answer is no, because G, the root, is the lowest sounding tone of all. So it's in root position. So really for number 5, it looks like all I have to have written in the blank is Roman numeral lowercase 6. That's right. I might have time. Let's try one more question, perhaps, if you have one, before I correct this. Yeah.
If nobody else has one,
That's
can
okay.
we walk through number 6 on B?
Number 6 in section B. Okay. Let's do that. Change the clock here. Okay, we're using the alto clef. And we are told to use the context of the key of E minor. And we're supposed to build the triad in root position on scale degree 6. Now, again, eventually, not necessarily right now, eventually I'd like you to have these memorized. But in minor keys, or in E minor, what type of 6 Roman numeral do I write? Uppercase or lowercase? Uppercase. And that means the triad we're going to spell is major. Uppercase Roman numeral means major chord. Lowercase Roman numeral means minor chord. Okay. All right, so what is scale degree 6 in E minor? And let's use, just to be, I guess, specific, let's use the harmonic minor. Does anyone know what scale degree 6 is in E harmonic minor? Should be the tone C, just plain C natural. So that means C natural has to be the root of this chord. And in this clef, here's a C natural right there. Now, how do you spell a major triad on C? What are the other 2 notes going to be? E and G, right? C, E, G. It's a major triad on C. So that would be my final answer for number 6. Okay. I know that I need the triad on scale degree 6, whose root is scale degree 6. That's what this tells me. And I know I'm in a minor key. So I know that the Roman numeral is capital, which means the triad is major. Scale degree 6, the root of this chord is a C. So I put that as the root of my chord, and then I just spell the major triads. All right. Make sure your name is on that, and I'll take the page out of your workbook. 31 and 32.
but
Okay.
not.
Are there any others at this time? Well, today is another super important day, or most of the days in Unit 2 are really important in this class, because today we are going to learn about something called seventh chords. Seventh chords. We're just going to get an introduction to them, to see kind of how they work, so that you can spell them properly, and you can analyze or label them properly. Now, seventh chords are extensions, if you want to think of them that way, extensions of triads. For instance, if I were to extend a triad by adding another note a third above the fifth of a triad, the result is a four-note chord. So let me do that over here. Let's say I have this triad right here. G, actually let me need a little more space on the side of it. G, B, and D. Remember a couple classes ago I was talking about how when we construct or build chords in harmony in music, we stack notes in thirds, in intervals of thirds. This is what's called tertian harmony. Well, if I were to add another note to this chord, on the top here, I would stack a note a third above this note, which is the fifth of the triad. There's another one right there. And when I add a note a third above the fifth of a triad, the result I get is a total of 4 notes in the chord. 4 notes in the harmony. And because the interval between the highest or the added note that I just put in there, because the interval between that note and the root of the chord is the interval of a seventh always, chords of this sort are technically and correctly referred to as seventh chords. Seventh chords. Because the highest note, the distance between that one and the bottom note, the root of the chord, is always going to be some sort of seventh. So seventh chords will always have 4 different pitches to them. Triads have 3 different pitches, seventh chords have 4 different pitches. And these are the members of a seventh chord. Just like the triad members don't change. We still have the root. The next note up when the chord is stacked in thirds is called the third. The next note up is referred to as the fifth. And then finally, the highest note on top is called the seventh. So we have 4 members to this seventh chord club, so to speak. Root, third, fifth, and seventh. Okay, how many triad types, think back a couple classes, how many triad types were there that we studied? Did I mean all?
3. Oh,
4, right? There's really 4 triad types. Augmented, major, minor, and diminished. Yeah, right. So we have 4 triad types. And now this will ask you to think back to several classes ago. When we were studying intervals, remember how I had that diagram on the TV and sevenths were over on the right side because they could go between major, minor, augmented, and diminished types of seventh intervals? Okay. So if we have 4 triad types and we have 4 sizes of sevenths, right? We have major, minor, augmented, and diminished intervals. Just that interval. 4 types of seventh intervals. Technically, we might have a total of 16 different seventh chords. Because what we do is we combine triad types with different sized seventh intervals. But let's narrow this down. First of all, you know that the augmented seventh interval is enharmonic with the perfect octave. And so if we were to take a triad and on top of it add an augmented seventh interval above the root, it's not going to change the sound or add to the sound anything different than the triad notes itself, because an augmented seventh is enharmonic with the perfect octave. So basically, one of the types of seventh intervals possible to add on top of a triad is useless. An augmented seventh is not going to change the sound of a triad or add anything else to it, because it's just going to sound like one of the other notes in the triad, an octave away from one of those notes. So that leaves us then really with three types of sevenths that we can mess around with and add to triads. We can add major sevenths to triads, we can add minor sevenths to triads, and an interval of a diminished seventh to a triad. So now, if we have 4 triad types multiplied by 3 types of sevenths, that gives us a total of 12 seventh chords. I know you might think this is crazy because we only had 4 types of triads. And now you want me to learn 12 seventh chords? I protest. Well, I protest too, because we're not going to do that. The good news is that composers in the style of music we're studying basically only work with 5 different kinds of seventh chords. Just 5. Out of the 12 possible. They only dealt with 5, the rest they never messed around with. So we don't need to learn them. We don't need to learn them. Okay? Alright. Now, I'm getting, just give me a few minutes and I'll get to the point. Seventh chords are identified by the type of triad at the bottom of the chord and the type of seventh interval formed between the root and the seventh of the chord. So if I were to take this chord and dissect it and use different colors, I could show you this. I've got the triad part, GBD, and I've also got a seventh interval, that is G up to the highest note F. So this is the triad portion, and this is the interval of a seventh. What I do is if I look at it, the 4 notes of a seventh chord this way, as one part is the triad, the other part is the outside interval of a seventh, and if I merge these together or fuse them together, then I have the total conglomerate of a seventh chord. Okay? So this plus this, and now I use another chord, equals the grand total sum of all parts, which is the full seventh chord, all that. Red plus blue equals black in this case. So, as I said, seventh chords are identified by labeling the type of triad at the bottom of the seventh chord, and then the type of seventh interval that's formed between the outside notes, the root and the seventh member of the chord. Okay? So, we're going to, as I just finished saying, that there are a total of 5 types of seventh chords that we're going to mess with. And they're labeled like this. One of them, for instance, is what's called a major seventh chord. One of them is a major seventh chord. One of them is a minor seventh chord. One of them is a diminished minor seventh chord. And the other one is a diminished seventh chord. Now, what do these symbols and letters mean? The first letter in the seventh chord description refers to the type of triad on the bottom of the seventh chord. The second letter in each of these terms or symbols refers to the seventh interval, the interval between the root and the highest note of the seventh chord. And that's what all these letters mean when we start labeling seventh chord. So let's put that into terms over here. let's label this seventh chord appropriately as to one of those 5 types. What kind of triad do I have on the bottom 3 notes? G, E, D. Is that major, minor, augmented, or diminished? Major, right? GBD is a major triad. So I'll put a capital M in the placeholder for the triad quality. Now, what type of interval do I have from the root all the way up to the 7th, G to F? Do you guys know what type of 7th interval that is? It turns out to be a minor 7th. That's the interval, G to F natural. Because G to F sharp is a major 7th, so G to F natural must be a minor 7th, a half step small. So the type of chord that this 7th chord is turns out to be what we call a major minor 7th chord. Because the triad is major, and the 7th turns out to be a minor 7th. So we call the whole thing a major minor 7th chord. That's how that works. Now, let me, on another staff here, let me go ahead and show you or spell all 5 types of 7th chords possible in using the same root. So you can see the difference. And I'll just use G as the root, as I started using G as the root up here. That right there is an example of what I call a major 7th chord. A major triad with a major 7th interval from root to bottom to top. We have just finished looking at the major minor 7th chord. Another type is known as the minor 7th chord. The diminished minor 7th chord. And finally, the diminished 7th chord. Now, you can check this if you need to, but for instance, the minor 7th chord, it's a 4-note chord that has a minor triad on the bottom. G, B flat, D is minor. And then the 7th from G to F natural, that's a minor 7th interval. The diminished minor 7th chord has a diminished triad. The 3 notes on the bottom make a diminished chord, G, B flat, D flat. And then the 7th from the root all the way up to the highest note is still a minor 7th interval. Finally, the diminished 7th chord has a diminished triad, G, B flat, D flat, with a diminished 7th on the outside. G up to F flat is a diminished 7th interval. Let me play for you these 5 types of 7th chords so you can hear their specific color and sound. Here is a major 7th chord. Here's the major minor. Here is a minor. Here's a diminished minor. And here is a diminished. You've probably heard a lot of those sounds before, especially in jazz music. And now we're getting into the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty of the specifics, like what makes these sounds the way they are. I'm going to just raise this a little bit so I can get a little more link here. Okay. The author in your textbook uses 2 different symbols for 2 of these 7th chord types than I do. just know them. Instead of calling this first type of seventh chord the major seventh chord, the author in your textbook says, well, since the triad and the seventh interval are major, we're just going to say everything's major and shorten it to just call it the major seventh. So the author uses this term. It means the same thing as my term, the major seventh. Synonymous, same thing. Likewise, the author says, well, if the triad is minor and the seventh is minor, then everything is minor. And instead of calling it the minor seventh, we can just say that it's a minor seventh. It just shortens it to one. So the minor seventh, what I like to call a minor seventh, the author just terms minor seventh. It's the same thing.
How is that different than an interval then?
Yeah, it's not very different, but if you analyze a seventh chord with this symbol, people will know what you're talking about because there'll be a four-note chord there instead of just a minor. Yeah.
You know, the division.
Yeah, there are two other symbols for the two diminished seventh chords. And I will use these other symbols interchangeably. These are not just the author's terms, these are everybody's terms. Another way to symbolize a diminished minor seventh is to show a circle with a slash through it and the number 7. Believe it or not. So, a circle with a slash with a 7 means diminished minor 7. And in terms of musicians and music, the diminished minor 7th is also referred to as the half diminished 7th chord. Why? Because half of its recipe is diminished and half isn't. Half of it's minor. You see, one part is diminished, one part minor, so we call it a half diminished 7th chord. And then another symbol for the diminished 7th is an open circle with no slash and a 7. And another term or name for this type of 7th chord is called the fully diminished 7th chord. Fully diminished because everything is diminished, the triad and the 7th. Okay. Now, I want to take 1 minute, 2 minutes, just to make a distinction here. When I originally wrote this up on the board here and before class started, this is all just talking about triads, 3-note chords, that's it. Notice that the degree symbol or the circle by itself is used to indicate a diminished triad. Notice that the degree symbol or circle, not by itself, but with a 7, notice that refers to a specific type of 7th chord. The only type of 7th chord, and that this shows you, is the fully diminished 7th chord type. Notice that a circle with a slash and a 7 refers to just the half diminished 7th chord, and that specific type, and that's all. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you write the Roman numeral for a triad, you would never write a circle with a slash. Because you would be saying that the triad is half diminished. And there is no such thing. It doesn't make any sense. The circle with a slash can only be used in connection with a 7, and it only refers to a 4-note chord, the 7th chord. I know I have students that get that mixed up. But I'm trying to tell you right now, you would never write a circle with a slash when you're talking, labeling a triad. The circle with a slash is always used in connection with a 7, and it's always used in connection to label a 4-note 7th chord. Okay? A circle with a slash with a triad makes no sense at all. Makes no sense at all in music. All right. One more thing I got to show you about these, and then we're going to do some examples. I didn't used to do this when I first started teaching seventh chords, because I felt it was bogging students down, it was taking up precious time, slowing them down. But I'm going to do it anyways, just so you know the internal makeup of these seventh chords. Because a lot of students at this point are still struggling to compute the bottom three notes and find out what type of triad that is. You know, augmented, diminished, minor, or major. So this is what I'm going to do. I guess I'll put it in another color. I'm going to tell you what kinds of thirds you have to stack up. All the thirds from the bottom to the top to get these various types of seventh chords. Now the way I recognize and analyze seventh chords is I just look at these three notes as a block, and then I look at the outer note as an interval. And that's enough for me. But if you really want to know, and you check all the intervals of the thirds as you stack them up, the major seventh chord consists of a major third on the bottom, a minor third in the middle, and a major third on the top. This type of seventh chord here, the major minor seventh, wait a second. Yeah. Major third on the bottom, minor third in the middle, minor third on the top. The minor seventh will consist of these thirds, a minor third on the bottom, a major third in the middle, and a minor third stacked on top. The half diminished seventh chord is going to consist of, it looks like a minor third on the bottom, a minor third in the middle, and a major third on top. And finally, what I call a fully diminished seventh chord is just a stack of all minor thirds. That's an easy way to remember the fully diminished seventh chord. Every note is a minor third above the lower one. All minor thirds stacked up. Do you have this staff at least? Do you have this much in your notes? Because I need to erase this so we can do some examples now. The only thing I'm going to ask you to do between now and Friday is spell these types of seventh chords and then also identify these types of seventh chords. All right. Let me give you one just to identify. Bass clef, and this is the chord. Using any of the appropriate labels that I told you about, whether the author's label, whether one of those labels, whichever one is appropriate, what type of seventh chord is this? It's B flat, D, F, and A. What I do is I look at the triad. I know B flat, D, F is a major triad. And then B flat up to A, I know is a major seventh interval. So I would label this one as a major seventh chord. And that's what it is. If you want to label it using the author's symbol as just capital M7, that's fine. I know what that means. But you've got to get used to looking at these notes and identifying what's what here. If you're not that adept at looking at a triad, the bottom three notes, and identifying that right away, then you'll have to go B flat to D as a major third, D up to F is a minor third, and F up to A is a major third. Which seventh chord went major, minor, major third? That should be, if I did that right, it should be right. It should be this one. But you see how if you compute all the intervals of a third and a seventh chord, which is fine for now, but do you see how that's going to take up more time and start to slow things down? As opposed to just looking at the bottom three notes and saying, oh, that's a major triad, and the top note, or the outside interval is a major seventh. Let's try another one. How about, stay in the bass clef here. A flat, C, E flat, and G flat. Take a look at that one closely. Who can tell me which of the 5 types of 7th chords is that? What type of triad is on the bottom? A flat, C, E flat. Major triad? Yep, I will agree. What type of interval is A flat up to G flat? What type of seventh is that? It's not augmented. We know that those aren't even. It's actually a minor, minor seventh. So this is a major minor seventh chord. Let's try to spell a few. We'll go to the treble clef. And I'm going to give you, this note is the bottom of the root of the 7th chord. And I need you to help me spell one of those. Fully diminished seventh above that root, which means diminished triad and a diminished seventh interval. Well, I also know that a fully diminished 7th chord is stacked all minor thirds. You can do it that way if you want. What's a minor third above C sharp?
E.
What's a minor third above E? And what's a minor third above G? You stack all minor thirds, you'll always get a fully diminished 7th chord. It'll make the triad the right kind, it'll make the outside 7th interval just right, everything will be just perfect if that works for you. But here the triad is diminished, C sharp, E, G. And the 7th from C sharp up to a B flat, that is a diminished 7th interval. How about, oh, this is a good one. How about one more? We'll stay in the treble clef. I'm going to give you this note as the root, G sharp, and I want you to help me spell the half diminished 7th chord with a root of G sharp. Do you want to do it by intervals of third all the way up, or do you want to do it by triad and then tack on the 7th interval? Doesn't matter to me. Let's try it the triad way. I know a diminished triad above G sharp is G sharp, G sharp B. And then I know that a minor 7th above G sharp is F sharp. And so those would be the exact notes I need to complete this type of 7th chord. If you check the intervals of the third, the interior intervals, G sharp to B is a minor third, B to D is a minor third, but D to F sharp is a major third. And that's how it's slightly different from the fully diminished 7th chord. But you need to use whatever accidentals are necessary to get the right intervals, to get the right triad type on the bottom, and to get the right outside 7th interval. Now, is that impossible? No, it's not. You can do this. Does anyone have any questions before I enter what your next assignment? All right, so your next assignment is out of the workbook. It should be page 21. And let me just look at page 21. This sections A and B. Yeah. You do not need to do section C at the bottom. Just the first two sections, A and B. And that should be all for today since we're out of time. So thank you.